guy out of Spokane who was a coroner or a pathologist, and then he testified as an expert, but he testified mainly for the state, and we had him in a case. And he told me, he's a guy, I was probably just 70. He's the old guy, but that's not old anymore. So he said he did 28,000 autopsies. And I let it go. I said, that's awfully high. Afterwards, there was some number like that, something ridiculous. There was 38,000. I figured it out afterwards. Every day of the year, he would have had done 10. Basically, all his professional life came out to that many. It's like, you know, I figured that out beforehand. Great cross-examination. I mean, maybe a little puffing, doctor, you know, or maybe you count every autopsy done by anybody else on your staff. Yeah, yeah. So there's you and Dr. Hara. And do you have any other pathologists?
Yeah, several. There's Dr. Aldo Pizarro, who worked in Chicago.
It's all about
Dr. Jim Williams, who came here as training in Mexico.
So do the illustrative ones just get folded?
Yeah, I need to actually fold them.
Just kind of house over here.
Private autopsies, there are people who want to have an autopsy done if it's not a county matter, you know, do you do those also?
No, but kind of conflict of interest in using funds that we do. Conflict of interest for me doing an autopsy in a county.
Please rise.
Ready for the jury?
Yes.
Bring the jury in.
Please rise.
What'd she say? I know. What? I don't know. You're just trying to throw me off stride. Not hard to do. Was there,
No. I was multitasking my head.
Just thinking of something, the next thing I have to do.
be seated?
Okay, Dr. Mouse, did you have a chance to draw in where the hemorrhages were on 126?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and those, the size of the dots, is that supposed to indicate how big the hemorrhage is, or is that just location?
That's just location.
Okay, so tell us where they were and whether they were internal or external, or, you know, like outer or inner muscles.
Okay, basically, one hemorrhages that would be seen on the musculature that's exposed here in the diagram are just the dots, and then ones that are circled represent hemorrhages that are on deeper layers of musculature in the neck. And my apologies, I drew this one on the wrong muscle, so that one is in error. However, and I don't know if you want specifics of what muscles they're in. Okay. So, as listed here, number one would be in the right sternocleidomastoid muscle. Theoretically, this should have a circle around it, I suppose, because it's on this. Both of these muscles are different bellies of the same muscle.
And the circle means, I'm sorry, the circle around it means what?
That it would be deeper. So this would be slightly deeper. At any rate, it's on the sternocleidomastoid muscle. roughly 7 centimeters above its origin. Number 2, also on the sternocleidomastoid muscle, this time on the left side, slightly lower, about 5 centimeters above the clavicle. Number 3 is on a somewhat deeper muscle called the omohyoid, about 3 centimeters above its origin, so fairly low down in the neck. Number 4, roughly symmetrically placed on the left omohyoid muscle, 5 centimeters above its origin, so about roughly 5 centimeters above the clavicle. Next, the 5th here is a hemorrhage in the right sternohyoid muscle, about 6 centimeters above its origin from the sternum, so about 6 centimeters up the neck. Number 6 here is in the right sternothyroid muscle. Again, this is a muscle somewhat deeper in this diagram, not on the surface, just 2 centimeters above the clavicles. Number 7, the left sternothyroid muscle, again a deeper muscle than what is depicted here, and about 1.5 centimeters above the sternum or clavicles. And finally, number 8 is a hemorrhage higher up in the neck, a single one in a muscle called the thyrohyoid on the left. And that's a very short muscle, so it's just roughly midway along its length.
Okay, so are you talking about a band of hemorrhages around the lower neck? Would that be an accurate way to put it?
Yes,
Okay, except for the one that's higher up.
there's just one higher up that we found, yes.
Okay. And can you tell us what the hyoid bone is?
The hyoid bone is kind of a U-shaped or C-shaped bone in the neck, just above the voice box, depicted here in the diagram, so at the very top of the neck. And it's the muscular attachment, one of the muscular attachments of many of these muscles.
Is it actually bone?
Yes.
Okay. And is it sometimes, but not always, significant in strangulation cases?
It is one of the structures in the neck that can be fractured when somebody is strangled, yes.
Now, slide number J, is that an X-ray of Nicole Pietz's hyoid bone?
Yes, the hyoid bone is on the top of the X-ray. The thyroid cartilage and larynx or voice box is on the lower end.
Okay, now, do you see anything significant? Well, first of all, was her hyoid bone fractured?
No, it was not.
Okay, does that mean she wasn't strangled?
No, it does not.
Okay, do you see anything significant about the structure of her hyoid bone that's a little unusual?
You can see in an X-ray, we've all seen them, the white part is bone, and the darker part is not bone. So you can see here 3 separate segments of bone that are individual, and that is how the hyoid develops. It starts as a piece of cartilage, as basically all bones do, and then develops 3 ossification centers, means it starts to turn into bone in 3 separate spots, on the sides and one in the center. In most people, these 3 segments fuse together when we're about 20 years old. In some people, they, for whatever reason, just a developmental anomaly, they never actually fuse together. They remain 3 bones, which means the structure has 3 segments of bone connected by cartilage, so it's springy, it's flexible, and really can't be broken.
And is that the case with her?
Yes.
Now, were there injuries to her eye that you can draw on the diagram? And was there an injury to her eye?
Well, there was a small amount of hemorrhage on both the medial towards the middle of the face and lateral towards the edge of the face, both corners of the left eye.
Okay,
So-
could you, I'm sorry, let me give you the red pen back. Could you draw that back on? Or draw it on the diagram?
roughly here and here on the whites of the eye at both corners.
Okay, I'm going to talk about that in a minute after we've talked about her mouth. Were there injuries to the inside of her mouth as well, or things that you could visualize there?
There were. There was a small bruise on the inner lower lip, and bear with me just one moment while I see exactly where that was. Right in the midline, so roughly here
Okay,
was a small contusion, about 1/4 of an inch.
okay. And then how about the inner lining of the lips?
The inner lining, particularly of the upper lip, was a collection of what are called petechial hemorrhages. These are basically tiny little red dots that represent tiny little ruptured blood vessels.
Okay, and is that true on the lower lip as well?
I believe there were some petechiae there, which can be demonstrated here, some tiny little red dots, perhaps more pronounced in the upper lip, but also present in the lower lip.
Okay, so with regard to the eye and the mouth, do you consider the eye to have been caused by sort of the same thing as little dots inside the mouth?
That's very likely the case.
Okay, tell us how that happens.
Petechiae, these tiny little punctate hemorrhages that we saw in the mouth, and also larger hemorrhages on the surface of the eye, can be caused by an increase in blood pressure inside the head. And though there are a number of ways to achieve that increased blood pressure in the head, it is a warning sign of strangulation, pressure on the neck. The idea is that pressure on the neck stops venous blood drainage. So remember, arteries bring blood from the heart to the tissues, and they're pretty high pressure. The veins drain blood away from the tissue back to the heart, and they're fairly low pressure. The pressure on the neck will block up pretty easily with only maybe 5 pounds per square inch of pressure, will block the veins that drain the blood from the head. And yet, arteries are more protected and they're higher pressure, they will continue to try and pump blood into the head. So the pressure inside those blood vessels of the head rises, and it can cause these tiny little blood vessels to burst, leaving the petechial hemorrhages and the hemorrhages on the surface of the eye.
Okay, you can resume your seat, doctor. Oops, sorry.
Thank you.
With Nicole, did you see any sign of a ligature being used?
No, there were no abrasions on the neck to suggest a ligature.
Is that necessarily surprising that in a strangulation you wouldn't see any marks beyond that bruise that was on the clavicle, on the outside?
No, not surprising at all.
Why is that? It seems like it would bruise up the whole thing.
Well, I'm not sure how to answer why you don't see it. There's often no abrasions simply because scrapes or anything like that, because in a manual strangulation, somebody using their hands, the hands are relatively soft and not going to scrape up the skin a whole lot. Occasionally you can see small scrapes caused by fingernails, but certainly not in every case. As far as why you don't see bruising, I guess I don't know how to answer the question of why something doesn't occur. It's just, statistically speaking, it's not something that we do see. We see bruising on the inside the muscles of the neck, but not necessarily on the surface of the skin.
Okay. And given the sort of ring of hemorrhages inside the neck that you've described, does that tell you anything, given that they're on both sides, whether one or two hands were used against her?
I don't know that it's a specific enough pattern to say with certainty, what sort of grip or how many hands were used. I could imagine scenarios that would, both one-handed and two-handed, that would cause these kinds of injuries.
Okay. What is it about putting a hand or hands around someone's neck that causes them to die?
Well, it's lack of, first, blood flow. If simply the veins are occluded by this pressure, the arteries can only pump so hard and will only fight against a certain amount of pressure. So you get congestion in the head, and then no more fresh blood is coming in. With a little bit more pressure, maybe twice the pressure or a little bit more, 12, 15 pounds per square inch of pressure, the arteries themselves that are at least in the soft tissues of the neck will be occluded. So that's further reducing the blood flow to the brain. And then finally, if there's more pressure still, the airway will be occluded, and not only is there no blood going to the head, but an individual can no longer breathe.
Okay. And when you talk about occluded, do you mean cut off?
Yes.
Basically? How long does it take to die that way?
A very few minutes. With complete obstruction or lack of blood flow, it's just 3 or 4 minutes.
Did you receive a toxicology report as well?
Yes, I did.
And what is the point of ordering toxicology in homicide cases?
Well, first of all, we are ruling out other causes of death. Was this an overdose or something, particularly when the findings are somewhat subtle, as in a strangulation case. We rule everything else out, make sure nothing else caused the death. Second, it is information that can be used in a setting such as this to look into the circumstances surrounding an individual's death.
And what were the results that you received with regard to whether she had alcohol in her blood?
Whether she had alcohol, the blood alcohol was negative.
What about oxycodone?
Oxycodone was present in a level of 0.01 milligrams per liter.
And how would you describe 0.01 in terms of amount, sort of in a relative sense?
This is a low level, basically the low end of what would be considered a therapeutic dosage of medication, not an intoxicating level, and certainly not a dangerous level.
And just in terms of other types of drugs that were found in her blood, what were you told?
There was also diphenhydramine found.
Which is antihistamine, I think we heard.
Antihistamine, Benadryl, yes, also present in a low level, kind of the very low end of therapeutic. Tylenol or acetaminophen was found, also in a pretty low level. A very small amount of a drug called sertraline, which is also known as Zoloft. It's an antidepressant, anti-anxiety sort of drug, present in a very low level.
Okay. And subsequent or after all these results were in, was the blood sent in for further liver testing? Or, I'm sorry, that made no sense. Was there a sample of the liver sent to the toxicology lab for further testing?
Yes, there was.
Okay. Now, other than the injuries we've discussed, was there anything else wrong with Nicole in terms of her health or any other reason that, in your opinion, led to her death?
No, there was not.
So what did you determine the cause of death to be?
The cause of death was asphyxia due to strangulation.
And asphyxia means what?
Lack of oxygen to the brain.
Doctor, I'd like to ask you something about the pattern of the injuries. Given the large bruise on the inside of the right arm and the back of the left hand and the lower back,
Your Honor, I'm going to object to the prosecutor calling that a large bruise. I don't think we have had testimony to that effect.
okay, the bruise, the jury can look at the picture and make that determination, the bruise. And given the matching bruises on each foot and each hip and each thigh, would those, in your opinion, injuries be consistent with someone laying fully on top of this woman, pinning her down, holding her down with his body weight, his knees, and his legs, causing the bruising that we see there?
That scenario could be consistent with the pattern of bruising that we're seeing.
And given the injuries on the inside of the mouth and the inside of the neck, are these all consistent with someone pinning her down in that way while strangling her to death with his hands?
Yes.
I have nothing further. Thank you.
Ross?
Doctor, those injuries could take place under different scenarios, couldn't they?
The bruises on the extremities and the hips are
Yes.
nonspecific. The bruises in the neck, I think, are pretty specific for a strangulation.
Okay, and we agree with that. Nicole was strangled, but as far as the other bruises, they could have been inflicted other ways than a person laying on top of another person or pinning a person down, right?
That's true. They are nonspecific injuries.
Doctor, you mentioned on direct examination that you observed a vaginal injury. Is that right?
Yes.
And you called that a laceration, right?
Yes.
A laceration is basically a cut, is it not?
No, a laceration is a form of blunt force injury, so it's more of a tear than a cut. It's not a sharp object causing it. It's a tear caused by blunt force.
Okay, thank you for correcting that. And with regard to this, it was your opinion, I believe, that that was not caused by animal activity, correct?
Correct.
And the reason for that is?
Simply because it's a somewhat protected area. This is actually inside the vaginal canal, a short distance near the entrance, and would be a very unusual spot to see postmortem animal activity.
Okay. And if that was animal activity, you'd expect that there be other animal activity in that same location, sort of working its way in towards there.
Yeah, a very small laceration isolated by itself in a protected spot is not the pattern of animal activity.
And that could be a pre-mortem injury, is that right?
Yes.
Doctor, when I interviewed you back in your office on, or let me ask it this way, do you recall I did interview you back in May 15th of 2013 in your office?
Yes, I do recall that.
And Ms. Kristen Richardson from the prosecutor's office was there also, is that right?
Yes.
Do you recall telling me at that point in time that it was your estimation that the time of death, figured back from the time that the body was located or found, was a week, 7 days, plus or minus 3 to 4 days?
I don't recall, but that sounds correct, yes.
That could be possible.
Yes.
So if we were to play that out then, 7 days minus 4 days could be 3 days. In other words, it could be 3 days after the body was found, or before the body was found.
The body would had to have been kept in a warmer environment for a period of time before it was moved to this location for the postmortem changes to become this advanced in order to achieve this level of decomposition. 3 days seems a little short to get to this level of decomposition in the cold, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Would 4 days be sufficient?
It's becoming more likely. It's obviously the postmortem changes are really difficult to predict. So the closer you get to a week, I think the more likely it is. But I suppose 4 days is beginning to be in a reasonable time period. Yes.
Okay. And then on direct, you talked about transit time, and now I'm talking about the transit time from the time that a person swallows a piece of food or a meal until that time that the food leaves the person's stomach. Is that the proper terminology, transit time?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And I believe you said that if there's either a large or a fatty meal, the transit time could be 6 to 8 hours.
Yes.
And I might have said that too fast. I didn't mean 68 hours. I meant 6 to 8 hours, right?
Yes.
There are certain things that could slow that down, though, aren't there?
Yes.
And one of those things is that the person is taking an opioid.
Yes, opioids, basically narcotic painkillers, do slow down the gastrointestinal tract.
And Percocet is an opioid.
Yes.
And in terms of the amount of opioid that was found by the toxicologist in Ms. Nicole Pietz's blood, you said that's 0.01, and that's a therapeutic amount. Is that correct?
The very low end of therapeutic, yes.
Low end of therapeutic. But there's no, I mean, in other words, assuming that, just let's talk about somebody other than Ms. Pietz, and let's talk hypothetically. Assuming that a person has a large meal, and it's a fatty meal, and assuming that they take the opioid at the same time they're taking the meal, and that they die 5 hours afterwards. Okay, can you make that assumption?
Okay.
And that their opioid level at the time of death, or at least measured after death, is 0.01. Yes?
Okay.
In that situation, you'd expect that the opioid level earlier in that 6-hour period or 5-hour period would have been higher, right?
That's a complicated question. I don't know exactly the absorption rate of oxycodone. That's, I apologize, just beyond my expertise.
But
In 5 hours, it could still be on the rise. It still could be in the absorption phase of a medication.
okay, but it could also have been higher earlier and lower later. I mean, you
I don't know the answer.
You don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
Thank you. No further questions.
Anything else from the state?
Just briefly,
Dr. Mansroom,
That little hair that you described just inside the vagina,
Yes.
how big did you say it was?
0.2 inches, I believe. Bear with me and I will find it in the report again. Yes, 0.2 inches.
Okay. Now, you indicated that it was the result of blunt force trauma.
Yes,
Right.
a small tear.
And if someone were to jam his finger with some force into the vagina, could it cause a tear like that?
Yes, it could.
Now, when you're talking about the time of death, and given the waterlogged hands and feet that Ms. Pietz had, would you expect it to have been wet for a large part of the time that she was outside? Or that she was submerged even?
It does take hours, many hours, to develop that particular thickening of the skin to that degree, and that pale wrinkled skin. It takes a number of hours for the water to absorb into the skin like that. And the body was soaked when I saw her. So yeah, I mean, it appeared that she'd been out and in the wet for some period of time.
Okay. Do you remember what the weather was like that week?
I remember it being chilly, but beyond that, I don't remember exactly what it was like.
Thank you. I don't have anything else.
Nothing further, Your
I
Honor.
may step down your excuse. Do you have any exhibits there?
No, I don't, just a pair of scissors.
You didn't bring these in through security, did you?
No, no, I did not.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm your testimony in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Be seated.
Could you tell us your name and spell your last name, please?
Yes, my name is Amanda Black. My last name is spelled B-L-A-C-K.
And what is your occupation?
I am the Quality Assurance Manager at the Washington State Patrol Toxicology Laboratory.
And what do you do as the quality assurance manager?
As the QA manager, I basically work in developing and monitoring the methods that we use at the laboratory for the testing of the samples that are submitted to the laboratory.
And the toxicology lab, is that separate from the main crime lab? It's a different
It is, yes.
place. We heard testimony earlier from Mary Wilson. Was she part of the toxicology lab at one time too?
Yes.
Can you tell us how long you've been at the toxicology lab?
I've been at the laboratory since January 2007.
And have,
January what?
2007.
and can you tell us a little bit about your background and training? Well, first of all, let me ask you this. Have you always been the quality assurance manager?
I have not.
Okay, what did you do before that?
I started as an analyst performing casework testing in January 2007. Training was on an ongoing basis. We all have to go through basic training in all of the testing that we perform, theory behind the instrumentation, learn about different drugs and also alcohol before we are given the authority to do testing in cases. Once we are doing testing, we have training outside of the laboratory put on by other agencies or specific to the field of toxicology by SOFT, the Society of Forensic Toxicologists, and other national or international societies based in toxicology. We also have access to peer-reviewed journals, books, other articles that we rely on when doing interpretation, looking for certain types of tests we need to perform, asking or answering questions of people that call inquiring about the testing that we've done. So it's an ongoing process of training. After I was an analyst, I became the forensic technical lead, basically assisting the quality manager at the time with monitoring the testing we do in the laboratory, maintaining the instrumentation. Then I became the quality assurance manager, where I oversee the testing in the laboratory from a quality perspective. I'm also responsible for the laboratory's accreditation, proficiency of the analysts, and I also have a forensic technical lead that assists me in the quality assurance department.
Okay, and what's your educational background?
I have a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry and a Bachelor of Science in Veterinary Science from the University of Arizona.
Now, you started working at the lab in 2007. At some point, did you receive a sample related to the Nicole Pietz case to perform testing on?
I did, yes.
Do you remember when that was?
I believe it was October 2008.
Okay. And what was the sample of?
I received a sample of liver.
And would that have been taken at autopsy?
Yes, I believe so.
And you actually can test liver tissue for the
Yes.
presence of drugs?
Yes.
Counsel, is this in lieu of the other Wilson?
No, it's not.
Okay, it's not in lieu of
Susan?
Susan
No.
Wilson?
So who did the request come from to do the liver testing?
It came from the medical examiner's office.
And did you perform the testing on that liver sample?
I did, yes.
And did you find any indicators of drugs in the liver sample?
Yes.
Okay. Let me ask you this. What role does the liver play in the body in terms of moving drugs through the body?
Different types of drugs, different classes of drugs are metabolized different by the body. Most of them are metabolized somewhat by the liver and or kidneys. Usually different drugs metabolize in the body, and there are metabolites of the drugs that are generated. Some drugs do have metabolites, some do not. In liver or other tissues, we can sometimes see metabolites only, parent drugs only, sometimes both, depending on what the compound is. But the liver is definitely one of the organs that does the metabolizing of drugs that are ingested into the body.
Okay. And by metabolizing, what do you mean?
It assists in taking that drug and breaking it down into components, and then usually the drug is excreted in the urine or the feces. Again, like I said, sometimes as the metabolite, sometimes as the parent drug, and sometimes a mix of both.
Okay. So is it possible that there may be a drug that that doesn't show up in the blood, for example, that might show up in liver testing?
It would probably depend on the type of compound and the time frame of when that drug was ingested and began to be metabolized by the body, and when the blood or tissue sample was taken.
Okay. What was the request that was given to you about why the liver testing was being asked for?
I was asked to specifically look for the presence of oxycodone in the liver sample.
And what's the significance of that?
I believe there was a small amount of oxycodone found in the peripheral blood sample that was initially submitted to the lab and tested. So this was following up on that to see if oxycodone was indeed present in the liver as well.
And might that show chronic or long-term use of the drug?
I would expect that if someone was using large amounts of a drug that was metabolized partly by the liver, or maintained a constant dosage in their system, that their liver would probably show signs of that compound being in the tissue.
Okay. And did you find any evidence of oxy in the liver?
I did not.
Did you find evidence of a drug called gabapentin in the liver?
I did not.
Okay. Did you find evidence of nicotine in the liver?
No.
Okay. How about in the urine? Did you test that as well?
I did not.
Okay. What else did you find in the liver, if anything, of any significance?
I believe the liver had diphenhydramine, which is an antihistamine compound, sertraline and its metabolite, which is often prescribed as an antidepressant medication.
And anything else?
No.
Okay, what was your understanding of what the oxycodone level had been in the blood?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
What was your understanding of what the oxycodone level had been in the blood?
I believe the initial report had a level of 0.01 milligram per liter.
Okay. I have nothing further. Thank you.
Anything else, Counsel?
Yes. Ms. Black, you actually, if not wrote a report, your findings went into a toxicology report, is that right?
Yes.
And I just need a moment to find the tox report, which I believe is exhibit here. Thank you.
Many eyes have been notes.
Yes. Has that been,
It has not been offered or admitted.
okay.
94 is also some tox results. And neither have been offered or admitted.
I'm going to hand you what's been previously marked as State's Exhibit number 94. And that's a tox report that was prepared by the Washington State Crime Laboratory, is that right?
Yes.
That particular report does not have your results in it, does it?
No, this one does not.
Okay. There was a subsequent report that was done that does have your results in it, is that correct?
Yes.
Do you have a copy of that with you?
I do, actually, yes.
Okay, would you pull out your copy, please?
Sure.
Do you have that in front of you?
Yes.
And those findings that you came out with, those are set forth in that report, is that right?
Yes.
And that's under liver,
Yes.
yes? So it looks like that was added subsequently to the exhibit I showed you there. Was that exhibit number 94?
Yes.
Okay. And that showed those things that you talked about already. That's the first one is, I'm probably going to pronounce it wrong, but the diphenhydramine.
Yes.
And that is, you indicated, that's, could be something like Benadryl, right?
Yes.
Cough syrup. The next one is sertraline, is that right?
Yes.
And that could be Zoloft or one of those antidepressants.
Yes.
And there's also one other thing found there. Is that a metabolite?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Now, there were some questions from the prosecutor about whether you found gabapentamine. Is that right?
Gabapentin, yes.
Okay. And I'm looking at a page in your quantitative report here where you have caffeine with a plus, nicotine with a plus, and gabapentin with a plus. Are you aware of that?
Is that from my data or the data from the testing that Mary Wilson performed?
Well, I'm not sure. I assumed it was your data. Can I pass that up to you?
Yeah, sure.
Defendant Exhibit 127.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as Defense Exhibit 127. Does that appear to be any type of report that you generated?
Yes, this is.
I see up on the top, it does say Amanda, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, and do you see where I'm referring to caffeine with a plus and
Yes,
nicotine with a plus and gabapentin, or am I pronouncing it right?
yes.
What does that signify?
Compounds that are either identified for a second time within the testing of a sample, or compounds that we don't go into further detail to confirm with a level. We indicate that it's found with a positive, but because we don't have the ability, or in the casework we don't go on to confirm certain compounds, they would not necessarily appear on the final report.
Okay, and those were found in the liver, I take it?
Yes.
Okay, so when you said on direct examination, at least I thought I heard you say that you didn't find any gabapentin, that would be incorrect.
This is not gabapentin, it's gabapentin breakdown.
Okay, so that's an indication that the person was taking gabapentin.
Possibly, but it's not confirmed, so it would be a presumptive positive.
Okay, and gabapentin is what?
Gabapentin is prescribed sometimes for seizure disorders or for certain types of nerve pain.
Well, by the same token, did you find through some presumptive tests on the liver that oxycodone was used?
No.
Now, you would expect, I think you testified on direct, that if the person was either taking a constant dosage or was a chronic user, you'd expect to find oxycodone in the liver.
Yes.
Okay. And so the fact that you didn't find any would then tell us the opposite, that the person was not a constant user or a chronic user.
I'm not sure what the time frame is for oxycodone to completely clear from the liver or the urine after the last dose, but I would expect that if someone was taking a constant dose of oxycodone in order to maintain a certain level in their system to combat pain, that we would see oxycodone and or the metabolite in the urine or the liver.
So if somebody was taking, for example, a dosage of 5 milligrams of oxycodone between 4 and 8 times a day for a period of 7 weeks, each day, for a period of 7 weeks, that would constitute a constant or a chronic dosage, wouldn't it?
If it was taken as prescribed at the time frame to maintain a constant dose in their body, then I would expect so, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
You redirect?
No.
You may step down.
Oh, wait, I do have one more question. Sorry, if I could reopen, Your Honor. Percocet and Endocet, those are drugs that contain oxycodone, is that right?
I believe so, yes.
Thank you. No further questions.
You may step down.
I would agree, Your Honor.
Okay, the jury can return to your room, please. And recess for today. That's true. Never put McNabb on today. You can let him go, Terry.
Your Honor, I'm going to be talking to my client for a second. Please interrupt when we're ready to go on. Is that okay? At this time, we can do that.
You folks can sit down. And for the state, having gone through our list on Friday and considering who you called today, you still have 16 witnesses left.
Yeah, I
You
think,
pared it down again.
I think we have, I think we're only gonna call,
Hmm?
Can I come up and hear that?
You may indeed. count? Did Terry poke her head out? All right. She did? All right. Counsel?
Yeah, Your Honor, we believe we have 5 more witnesses before we rest.
All right.
We're going to recall briefly Sergeant McNabb and Detective Jake Pavlovich.
McNabb,
And then we're calling Amber Cowart, Carla Hansen, and recalling Detective Mike Mellis, and then we expect to rest. So that may take
sorry,
the
the
first
second name you had was McNabb, and then who?
Pavlovich. Yeah, McNabb, Pavlovich,
And was there Amber Cowsert?
Cowart with a C.
And then what's Miss Hanson's first name?
Excuse me, Carla Hansen, Hansen with an H.
S-O-N?
I think it's S-E-N. And then Detective Mellis. And then we expect to rest tomorrow at that point. So we also wanted to address we received notice on Friday from defense that they're planning to call.
Let me verify this thing. So, Casey Johnson's off.
Anybody that we haven't named is only
Just
possible
confirming.
rebuttal.
Casey Johnson's out. Maloney's out.
For our case in
Rogers
chief,
is
yeah.
out. Susan Wilson is out. Arvine is out. Arvin Carlson is out. Amber Cowart's in. Pietz is out. Carla Hansen is in. Brittany Keller is out. Andrea Neal is out. Josh Nye is out. Chuck Pardee is out. Toya Vanderveen is out. Okay? And Elaine Vogt is out. Fair? All right. All right. So it looks like the only witnesses who are taking the stand that we haven't heard from yet is Ms. Cowart and Hanson. All right, what's the issues?
We need to get endorsement of witness from the defense and an offer of proof as to 2 of them.
We received an email Friday, I believe, indicating, aside from their client, that they're calling 3 potential witnesses, that they want to recall Sergeant Anderson.
I'm sorry, hold on. The email said who?
They want to recall or call, in their case, Sergeant Jesse Anderson. They want to call Dr. Carol Waymack. And they want to call, who's the doctor, Nicole's doctor, and then Penelope Gunterman, who was Nicole's counselor. And we had asked for, they gave us a brief description of Sergeant Anderson, which we wanted to address, and then I don't believe we've received any kind of offer of proof as to what they're calling Dr. Waymack or Ms. Gunterman for.
I've received, Mr. Allen told me a couple things that he expects Dr. Waymack to testify to, and I'd like a formal offer of proof because we'll be objecting to her testimony, and specifically with regard to a couple things that he
You're
mentioned.
objecting to it in full, or you're objecting to the pieces?
Well, I don't know, Your Honor, because I don't know what they expect her to testify
I
to.
can say it here. It's not very complicated, Your Honor.
Okay.
We're going to ask
Why don't we
Dr.
start? You said you're also objecting something to do with Sergeant Anderson.
My understanding is that they are calling him to impeach Tony Twitchell, and we just received at lunch from the court reporter his testimony,
You mean Anderson or Twitchell?
Twitchell, and
Right.
there's nothing to impeach him on. He appears to have admitted to everything counsel asked him about, so I don't believe it's proper impeachment. I can give a copy to counsel. I made some right before we came up.
What do you want to impeach him with, counsel?
Your Honor, that he told
I will tell you that I can't remember Twitchell, so I'd have to go
Yeah.
back. through my 3 pads of paper to find out.
Your Honor, it has to do with what he told the detective on the day in question, I'm sorry, about the day in question, where he testified that he had a conversation with Nicole Pietz on the day that the day before she went missing.
The day before.
And when he was interviewed by Detective Anderson, he never said that this conversation with regard to her husband having an affair took place on that day, on that Friday. He just told Detective
It would
Anderson
be a
that...
Thursday.
No, it would have been Friday. I'm sorry. She went missing Friday.
She went missing Friday evening. I thought it was Thursday that he supposedly had the conversation.
No, he testified he had a conversation with her Friday at work.
Okay.
And then she went home. We know that that's a night she went to Schwab and whatever. And then she was went missing sometime after that.
All right.
So he talked to her Friday, and we want to bring out from Detective Anderson that Tony Twitchell never told him that this conversation about David having an affair took place on that Friday. It just says, according to Detective Anderson's report, Tony Twitchell told me that sometime in the past, Nicole believed her husband was having an affair. So we want to impeach him on that. I'm going to have to read the transcript to see how well I set him up.
So what do you find in the transcript, counsel?
Well, we're looking
I
now.
mean, how well you established
The prior inconsistent statement, and I think we can...
Having set him up is a little pejorative.
Sorry, Your Honor, I'm just using,
I know.
lawyer slang.
I know.
And I think that it would be better if we could all review this tonight.
All right,
and
why don't
come
we
back
do that,
tomorrow.
counsel? Because I haven't looked at this, and I...
Neither have we.
No, we just
this is the
glanced
first
at it.
we're hearing what the impeachment is,
All
so.
right, so your impeachment is that he said something, the officer said he said something to him, but he certainly wasn't specific as to any particular day?
As to any particular day, yes, that's correct.
All right. Well, we'll take a look at it. You really want to do that? You want to bring it up again?
I think so.
All right.
And
I'll accept that as a tactical decision to revisit the issue.
thank you, Your Honor. And, the way that the court asked me that question, I'm going to actually review it again tonight and think it over again, so I...
You might.
okay.
My puzzlement was why you would want to bring up her statement to somebody that she thought he was having an affair and just argue about what date it might have been said.
Timing is crucial here, Your Honor.
Okay, well,
And there's been enough about an affair
I
already.
leave it to you,
Thank you, Your Honor. And then...
and I will accept it as whatever you do is a tactical decision.
Thank you, Your Honor. And as far as Dr. Waymack, I did tell Ms. Richardson, because it was, when we came back to court, I realized that was sort of on the fly, because I just I just figured this out. If
And that
that's
is
the
her
right-
internist?
Say again?
Is Waymack an internist, a gynecologist, or
She
a
is
general
the-
physician?
Family practice
Okay.
physician. And we had some hearings on that earlier in terms of trying to get her records and so
I
forth.
recall that, and I signed some orders.
And since that time, we have gotten her complete file on Nicole Pietz, and we have had, and I say we, meaning the prosecutors and ourselves, I interviewed her over the phone with the prosecutor on the line also. So we know pretty much what she's going to say. And Dr. Waymack treated Ms. Pietz since, I believe, 2000 or 2001. We're not going to go back that far, except to say, when did you start treating her?
Sure.
But we're going to bring up a couple different areas. The main area we're going to bring up is her treatment of Ms. Pietz for her back injury and her pain, and that has to do with the prescription of oxycodone. That's the Percocet and the Endocet, because there was constant prescriptions written, or at least there were enough pills given so that if Ms. Pietz took all the pills that were prescribed, and there's indications from Dr. Waymack that she required Ms. Pietz to come in every week and get the prescription refilled, that she was taking the drugs constantly, and it should have shown up as a chronic type.
You mean in the liver?
Yes. Or something else happened to the pills, and she wasn't taking them, and she's making it up that she was taking them.
Okay.
That's one thing. The other thing has to do with the surgery, breast enhancement surgery that came out during David Pietz's testimony. I'm sorry, not David Pietz obviously didn't testify,
Right.
but during his statement that was read to the jury,
Right.
where he mentioned that she had surgery in 2004 with regard to her breast enhancements. And what we want to bring out through the medical history that Nicole gave to Dr. Waymack, which is admissible in a couple different ways as a statement for medical history and diagnosis, but also it comes in under 806 because hearsay came in. Well, in any event, I believe that there are several exceptions.
806?
Well, probably not 806 here. It would be a statement for medical diagnosis and so forth.
You've already mentioned that.
Yeah, and that would be the grounds then.
Right.
That, in fact, her original breast enhancement surgery, and I'll probably just call it cosmetic surgery.
Did you say original? Did she have more than one?
Well, she had it done once, and this was a redoing of it. So it was done in the year 1990 when she was younger. That was before she met David Pietz, because there's been a lot of evidence coming in here.
Is the point here that you want to establish that she had had breast enhancement surgery even before meeting David to offset the notion that the only reason she had it was to please him?
Yes, exactly.
All right. Do you have any objection to that, counsel?
Yes.
Why?
Because it happened when she was 19, and there's been absolutely no testimony to talk about the fact that she had it to please him in any way. It is absolutely not relevant. It's not relevant. It's,
Well,
there's
let me
nothing that's
suggest,
come
counsel,
in.
counsel,
The court has refused, the court has ruled that we cannot bring in the defendant talking about liking other women's boobs or bodies or anything like that. We've assiduously avoided all of that.
counsel, it's going to come in. It's going to come in. I have drawn the line on a lot of things. That's true. But I think a recurring theme in this case is that Mr. Pietz was dissatisfied with his sexual life with his wife and sought out other women. I think there's an inference running through this, and certainly in my mind, what I was thinking is she had breast enhancement surgery in order to please him. Now I've heard for the first time that she had it as a corrective measure, having had it the first time before she even met him. So I think there's an inference there. Whether the state brought it up, whether they brought it up, there's a continuing inference there that whatever she did to enhance her body, her sexual attractiveness, was done for him.
But we have not been allowed to bring in the fact that what she looked like mattered to him. With regard to
Well, I think
commenting
that's-
about what other women look like.
Counsel, I haven't let it all in because I've drawn the line. And I think it's pretty clear that that within their family, how their bodies looked was very important to them in their sexual relationship. And this is the first time I've heard that, in fact, the first time she had any type of breast surgery was well before meeting. I'd assume that it was after they got together. So I will allow it for that purpose.
And, Your Honor, the only other thing is that we would want to bring in through Dr. Waymack that she did also prescribe some other pain medication for Nicole Pietz. She prescribed her Neurontin and Lyrica. This is during the time that she's treating the back injuries.
Neurontin is really not a pain medicine. That's what they say is the nerve medicine.
Well, a nerve medicine, and she prescribed this to try to get Nicole off narcotics.
Okay, but Neurontin is not a narcotic.
I'm sorry, well, I
I
didn't
don't think so.
If I said that, I misspoke myself. It's not a narcotic, but she prescribed Neurontin and Lyrica to
What's
try to
Lyrica?
get. It's like Neurontin, but it's a different formulation. Does the same thing to try to get her, to try to wean her off the narcotics.
I will allow that.
Thank you, Your Honor.
What
And,
about the counsel?
as far as the counseling, the only thing we intend to bring in, with the court's permission, of course,
Well,
is.
thank you.
What's that?
Thank you for acknowledging with my permission.
Well, I just want to give credit where credit is due, Your Honor. Is that Ms. Gunterman, in her notes, and these are in I'm not sure the exact date, but
Whether it's just, what's the issue?
she's going to say that, her notes show, and she's going to testify, that Nicole said to her, let me find this so I get the wording correctly, Your Honor, that Nicole indicated that the relationship is healthy, and these are in her notes, I believe, November 22, 2005, so we're only talking about 7 weeks prior to her death. Her relationship with her husband is healthy. Her husband keeps her grounded. He pays attention to the AA process, and when she's asked to tell the doctor what a safe, the therapist what a safe place is, she says, in the arms of her husband, and then nowhere in any of the questionnaires that she answers does she check mark next to where it says relationship problem.
Counsel?
Well,
Well,
if they really want to go there, they're opening the door to everything that says this wasn't a good marriage. And I would note that these statements were made, according to the psychologist, before she felt like a trust relationship was developed with Ms. Pietz, and that as time went on.
back up. You're saying that Ms. Gunter, is it a Ms. Gunterman?
Miss, she's a master's of social work, I believe.
All right, so
And-
you're saying that your cross-examination would be, she said these things, but later she backed off on them?
She said these things at the initial intake appointment,
Uh-huh.
as people typically do when they're starting therapy, talk very highly. Ms. Gunterman will say they typically talk highly of their families when they first start because they have no
And
insight.
it all goes downhill after that?
Basically, yes, and by her 11th appointment, she was starting to disclose nightmares of people trying to kill her. And at that point, she cut off therapy, which is also common for people in therapy when it gets painful that they stop. But there's another issue here, and that is if they're trying to portray, Nicole Pietz is saying that this marriage was good.
You can calm down.
I know the court has trouble hearing me sometimes,
No,
so.
you can speak up. I'm just
All
trying
right.
to keep the
Okay.
level of the animosity of motion down. I don't
Okay.
want to have you be medicated during the trial.
My point is, everything about their fights, about anything that she might have said about, I think David's having an affair, I'm worried he doesn't love me,
So
he
what
doesn't
you're
think.
saying- what you're
They're
saying-
opening the door
You're saying that
to all
to
that.
the extent that I've ruled other things inadmissible, and I cut it off, you're saying, once they start characterizing the marriage through her testimony, you think the door's been open to everything else?
Correct.
Your Honor, ER 806 says, attacking or supporting credibility of the declarant, I'll paraphrase it, when a hearsay statement has been admitted in evidence, the credibility of the declarant may be attacked.
Counsel, I know that.
Okay,
It means,
so-
what it means is that if you use hearsay, what you're effectively doing, hearsay for the truth of the matter asserted, effectively you're turning that out-of-court declarant into a witness. And having turned them into a witness, you may then, you can introduce prior convictions of dishonesty, you can impeach them, you can treat them as if they had testified on the witness stand. Is that what you're saying?
Well,